Good evening, dear viewers, and welcome to Visite. This Sunday evening, I would like to thank you very much for the numerous letters, of which I am choosing some again and again. I was approached by a family from Switzerland with a 4-year-old little girl suffering from neurodermatitis. And the email includes the question: to what extent vitamin D therapy or high-dose vitamin D therapy should, may and can be decisive key for this child? To answer this question, I want to mention at the beginning that a neurodermatitis is an inflammatory disease of the children's skin. This dandruff with severe itching, and it is very, very often associated with a certain level of suffering on the part of the children. And they write that they are already trying out anthroposophic remedies and homeopathic remedies, or integrated them into therapy. For me, this approach to therapy is good, but it doesn't do the cause any justice. We will come back specifically to vitamin D. But I would like to tell you that vitamin D is, of course, the basic problem here. When it comes to these children, vitamin D deficiency is significantly more likely, but there is no way around recognizing what is the psychological situation of the children. Neuro are the nerves and derma is the skin. This means that there must be a certain amount of space here too, in order to be able to recognise this problem of the children, and to what extent the situation of neurodermatitis increases symptomatically when the children experience some stress or sadness. The other thing is that an eczema treatment always begins in the gut. We know today that 85% of people respond to gluten and gluten-containing grains with inflammation after 4 to 70 hours. Children, of course, have different initial starting problems today than 10 or 15 years ago. This means that it is also very important here to do a stool test with the children to assess how is the mucosal immunity. Is there silent inflammation? Is there certain, I'll say, inflammation which children don't actually cope with? That means the child, the little one, can have good digestion and still have various problems in the intestines that need to be identified. The lactic acid flora makes up 80% of the intestinal mucosal barrier. This means the lactic acid producing cells such as lactobacilli, bifidobacteria, enterococcus are largely responsible for an intact immunity and also to guarantee a healthy mucosa. On the skin is only a mirror of a problem that lies much deeper. And I remember I was a young doctor, and a little boy came who was covered from head to toe as a baby with severe neurodermatitis. And I learned a lot from Dr. Wertmann, who was an Austrian paediatrician. Wertmann showed me how crucial and how important it is that these children grow up absolutely sugar-free, and that they do not use cow's milk products, got no yogurt, no milk, and he has refused to treat the children if the mother does not take it into account. And the mother had to come to me every time, that's clear, it was a baby, but also the grandmother, because it was very important to me that this little boy now had experienced a diet that had a significant positive effect on his clinical picture, which of course also happened more and more. And when the boy was around 11 or 12 years old, and they really did it very, very consistently, The boy didn't know it any other way either. He had teeth like snow. That was also very moving for me to see back then. How sugar brings our children's dental status quite a bit in a desolate condition. But I just wanted to tell you that again, at the beginning, that you should not only think about what to do therapeutically, and as a Coimbra protocol, we now get to vitamin D, but especially with atopy, with neurodermatitis, the causes have to be thought of, and for every child with this chronic inflammatory disease, I also want to know, what about the viral herpes reactivation? Today we see it again and again in atopy, even in children with neurodermatitis, a chronic reactivated herpes viral load. Herpes viruses can be skin viruses, but can also be neurogenic viruses such as the Epstein-Barr virus or like the herpes zoster virus, and all these things really need to be clarified. I think there may still be a few questions that you now have that need answers. Nonetheless, we really live in a big situation today that all of us people living north of latitude 47 to 55 degrees, so north of Rome from October to March, the position of the sun of between 290 and 330 nanometers is no longer justified. The sun's rays are no longer as intense due to the position of the sun. And we all get into this chronic vitamin D deficiency. It is especially on this format, but also very interesting. Colleagues have already commented on the subject of vitamin D. And yet it's still a situation today where I say it must be important to everyone knowing your vitamin D levels in March and October, because the relationship or link between health and sun is vitamin D. Vitamin D provides hundreds of thousands of immune responses. Vitamin D is what regulates 249 gene expressions on DNA. The vitamin D is the health police that provides the defense exactly when a development to mutated or tumor cells arises. And this vitamin D is, of course, for a child which develops atopy, and we may not be able to classify neurodermatitis today as an autoimmune process, but we can't do that either with Parkinson's, and still we see that a certain high-dose therapy of vitamin D significantly affects these things because of its action on immunological processes, even if we may not be able to detect any autoantibodies at the moment. Every illness is always a multiple triggered event. Of course, these children also need a good basic vitamin D therapy, and if we now assume a 70 kilogram person with 4,000 international units, that is absolute base, then it may be that these 4,000 international units with vitamin K are sufficient for him. But if you transfer that down to a 4-year-old child, then below 900,000 units, you can't make any progress at all. That means there has to be a good basic therapy for this child. And you talked about having a colleague near you in Bern that works with the Coimbra protocol. From this perspective, I would not go so far as to increase vitamin D quickly. First of all, basic questions have to be clarified here. And vitamin D at that moment, of course, also needs the view on a metabolic process. That if you went higher with the doses, of course, a great many other things of the thyroid gland, the parathyroid gland, the calcium balance, and so on would have to be watched. And I don't even think the last word has been spoken yet. Whether high-dose therapy is the means here, but you might have to exhaust the other diagnostic things first. And to what extent, you did not comment on this in the email, the extent to which things can still be changed for the little one in terms of nutrition. But treating atopic dermatitis is not an insurmountable task if you start by identifying the causes. But be careful. And I think you've come a long way in your knowledge of these things. For God's sake, never treat it with cortisone. Because at that moment, the children naturally have a very nice skin condition. But the day after tomorrow, when the whole thing gets transferred to the mucous membranes and then the children develop asthma, that means we have to be incredibly careful that neurodermatitis is an event that consists of a multiple complex cause of problems in these children. Please always be careful with a very small child, or research to what extent there is a toxic load from the mother. The little one was with you as a mother for 9 months. That is, toxic things that you had in your organism have transferred to the little one. So there are a lot of interactions with toxic metals, especially mercury, aluminium, lead and cadmium. And if the detoxification capacity of you as a mother was weaker, it always happens that way. From anamnestic experience, mothers who underwent amalgam repairs shortly before pregnancy, or I hope never again during pregnancy, but anyway, the firstborn is, of course, more loaded than a second or thirdborn. And I can't see from these records if the little one is now first, second or thirdborn, and yet it must be said the interrelationship of mercury and heavy metals with the zinc receptors are crucial. A skin event, a regeneration event, an insufficient regeneration event, always has something to do with the zinc metabolism. And after the children's zinc levels have been checked, and please always do that in whole blood, because 70% of zinc is found intracellularly, it means supporting these children with zinc as well. The Sarnum company has the zinc-ochyl, which is more of an informative solution. But on the other hand, it also has zinc with 15 milligrams for the little one. This can and should also be substituted in a targeted manner. Now, I would perhaps not give more than 15 milligrams because the absorption is anyway only 10 to 20% of it is absorbed. And if you need more, always in combination with vitamin C. And zinc is actually not capable of being stored in our body. Which means, if so, then we should have zinc 2 or 3 times a day, either by splitting such a tablet or with the drops. It can, of course, be dosed correctly. Please also remember that omega-3 is incredibly important to reduce inflammation from fatty acids. And also this evening primrose oil, the evening primrose oil in local form. But evening primrose oil is very anti-inflammatory in combination with vitamin E for children in the most diverse forms. The daisy in its mother tincture, the Ceres company makes it. is also of crucial importance, especially when children are also very itchy. While I was talking about zinc, it struck me that I just have to tell you, please let the little one be examined for a Cryptopyloria. We have addressed this topic of Cryptopyloria several times in different developments on diseases. Almost 15% of the population suffer from Cryptopyloria, which is a metabolic disorder that very often goes undetected. And these children excrete above all manganese, vitamin B6 and zinc with the urine, and slowly lose zinc as a result. And because zinc is one of the most important key trace elements, also for the immune metabolism intracellularly, of course a viral reactivation can also be explained. And that's why it's very important to ask such questions once again, because these children then also develop a vitamin B6 deficiency and also come into a manganese deficiency. Manganese is very important for the detoxification metabolism. Our cartilage and bones need manganese and vitamin B6 as a very important cofactor for infinite biochemical reactions, but above all for the vitamin and nerve metabolism. These are things that you should really always do and know at the beginning. So, testing for Cryptopyloria, that is a simple morning urine, this question can actually be solved quickly. However, it is more important, please do not substitute anything 4 or 5 days beforehand towards B vitamins or zinc, because then you would create the balance and would simply not recognise this loss. So from my side, not just a hasty shot here, please increase, and the Coimbra protocol, we made a broadcast about just this Coimbra protocol alone. I was allowed to get to know Dr. Coimbra, and I'm also one of the doctors who are trained for it, but I integrate the whole event into a therapy that first clarifies the causes on the other side. And today we are in the year 2021, and nevertheless it is a great time in which we already know such decisive things also in terms of causality. Vitamin D with many other processes that it regulates cellularly. Tumour growth, bringing it back into regulation to normal cell, or pushing the cell into apoptosis and thus immediately stopping a developing tumour cell. These are all things that are incredibly important, but maybe I could tell you a little more at the moment and open a few doors, or maybe even reveal a few pathways that are very rewarding, at least from my experience with all these children. And I can still remember I was a country doctor for 17 years and only had a children's consultation hour. And after 6 or 7 years, I was called to the German Association of Statutory Health Insurance Physicians, and I had to account for thousands of euros at the time that I would have spent too much on the children. And I would actually have completely overtaxed my budget as a doctor, and now I actually had to face this commission why I acted so negligently, and I was actually able to use all of these case studies to explain to them. I don't think they understood me at the time, that these children with neurodermatitis, with asthma, and with many really chronic diseases also needed this concept, because the goal was to get these kids out of there. And I'll never forget how I was told at the end, however, we consider it very necessary that you first send these children to a specialist. And I was then able to answer them that they were all children who had been to a dermatologist for a number of years, but the dermatologist, of course, unfortunately always only treated these things locally. And thus a clinical picture can only become chronic. In any case, with this in mind, I would like to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for your attention now this Sunday evening. I wish you a wonderful week that lies ahead of you, and I'm really looking forward to next Sunday at 8 p.m. Goodbye.